That night, the man thumbed the rifle's hammer back, then stopped halfway. 15 torches were crawling across the desert toward his house, and not one soul inside that house knew why they were coming. The Arizona desert stretched out beneath the night sky, deep red and silent. Far off, a dark hill, closer a wooden fence, closer still, a lamp still burning in a window. 3 months of quiet. 3 months he'd believed everything had been settled. Then the firelight appeared in the east. Not lanterns, torches, he counted. 12, 15. Moving in formation at the pace of people who know exactly where they are going. On the porch, one hand found another. Neither of them spoke. A knife rested quiet at the woman's hip, familiar as a part of her own body. Her hand tightened, once. Then let go. The torches kept coming. And the man at the front of them. He had just made out that face. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes. Cole Hargrove knew this the way he knew his own hands. Without thinking about it, without needing to be reminded, his father had taught him that. Dropped him on this land at age 10 and said work it, or starve, and then left to become a man who sent letters instead of showing up. And eventually stopped sending letters too. Cole was 25 now, still working it. The ranch sat 4 miles east of Dustfall, Arizona, which wasn't saying much because Dustfall itself sat at the edge of everything. A post office, a saloon, a sheriff who preferred the saloon, and 347 people who knew each other's business and discussed it freely. Cole did not know 347 people. Cole knew his cattle, his fence lines, the way the sky bruised purple about 20 minutes before a storm. The specific red of morning clouds that meant water your horses first, do everything else second. He did not know loneliness exactly. He just knew what it felt like when a house stayed too quiet and you stopped noticing. It was a Tuesday in late September when everything changed. Though he wouldn't understand that until much later. At the time it just felt like a Tuesday, long, dusty. His boots had a hole in the left sole and the ground was cooking through it, and he was thinking about getting to Dustfall before winter. New boots. A meal that wasn't his own cooking. Maybe a conversation with someone who talked back. He was halfway through that thought when he heard it. Not loud. That was the thing. Not crying. Smaller than that. The sound something makes right before it stops making sound altogether. A thin thread of noise rising from the canyon to his left. The dry one. The one that hadn't seen water since spring. Cole stopped. Biscuit stopped beside him. Because Biscuit was smarter than most people Cole knew. Wen could read a shift in attention before he knew he'd shifted. He tied her to a scrub brush. She accepted this with the dignity of an animal who understood the situation and was choosing patience, and went down into the canyon on foot. What he found was a girl, 8 years old, maybe less, tiny and curled against the canyon wall like she'd melted into it, brown skin. Dark hair matted with dust and sweat and stuck to her face, lips cracked pale, eyes glassy, with the particular distant look of someone whose body was shutting down one room at a time. She said something. Not English, Apache. Cole did not speak Apache. Cole spoke English and some Spanish, and the working language of cattle, which consisted mostly of whistling and cursing and hoping. But water. Every language had a word for water that sounded like a man drowning, and he heard it in what she said, and he had his canteen. He knelt in the dirt, good knee, the one that still bent without complaint, and held the canteen to her cracked lips. Slow, small sips. He'd seen men drown themselves drinking too fast in this heat, so he waited between each one. No rush, no hurry. The cattle could wait. She couldn't. When she'd had enough, she sagged against him, and he sat in the bottom of a dry canyon with a stranger's child asleep on his chest and thought, well, this is going to be a thing. He carried her on his back because she couldn't walk, and he could. And there wasn't another option, unless you counted leaving her there, which he didn't. 4 miles in the September heat with a child on his back. The sun dropping, the air going from hostile to merely unpleasant. Biscuit walked beside him because he'd untied her and She'd chosen to stay close, which was her way of saying she approved without making a sound about it. The girl slept against his shoulder most of the way. He didn't know where the Apache camp was exactly. He'd heard the Dragoon foothills, maybe 10 miles north. But she'd come from somewhere, and the tracks he found, small, panicked circles before they stopped, said east from the low ridge. So he went west and kept going. And when the first stars appeared, and he was seriously reconsidering his life choices, he smelled wood smoke, campfire, not brush fire, then horses. Then the thunder of hooves coming fast. He stopped walking. There are moments when running is the reasonable choice. When a man looks at his options and picks the one that keeps him breathing. Cole stood still, because he was carrying someone's child, and a man who runs while carrying someone's child is not a man worth being. He stood in the last Arizona light and counted the riders coming toward him. 1, 3, 7, 15. 15 Apache warriors on horseback, full gallop, pulling up short in a storm of dust and hooves, and every single one of them had something sharp or loaded aimed at Cole Hargrove's face. He did not move. He thought about moving, then thought better of it. The girl on his back, the hole in his boot, the plan to get to Dustfall, none of that survived a wrong move. So he stood, 15 men, 15 weapons, 1 canteen, 0 plan. Then the girl on his back woke up. She recognized the warriors immediately. A small, urgent sound, both arms around Cole's neck, face pressed against the side of his head, and said something in Apache that was fast and important, and clearly explaining a situation to people who were being unnecessarily difficult about it. The warriors didn't lower their weapons, but they didn't use them either. She said it again, louder. Then slower, the third time, with the patience of a child who has decided adults are going to take some convincing. The warrior at the front, older, broader, a scar along his jaw, looked at Cole with the careful expression of a man doing fast math. Cole looked back. The girl said one more thing, softer, pointing at Cole. And then, he would think about this for years. She patted the side of his head. Like a dog who had done something unexpectedly right, the scarred warrior said something brief. The weapons came down. Cole let out a breath that had been waiting a long time. Biscuit made a similar sound beside him. They'd been in agreement about most things today. The camp was 3 more miles north. Cole walked it with an escort of 15 Apache warriors, who didn't speak to him and weren't required to. The girl, he'd catch her name as Sosie, passed between the warriors, in whispers, the whole march, rode ahead and kept looking back at him with an expression that was equal parts grateful and mildly impressed, as though she hadn't entirely expected him to make it. Honestly, neither had he. The camp spread along the base of the Dragoon foothills in the way of things that are both temporary and ancient, fires and tents and the smell of food cooking, which Cole's empty stomach registered with aggressive clarity. Children appeared and then didn't, pulled inside as the party arrived. Dogs, horses in a rough corral to the east, and people watching. A lot of people watching. Cole kept his hands visible and his face neutral, which was easier than it should have been, because he was mostly concentrating on not falling down. His legs had opinions about the last 7 miles that they were expressing through his knees. They brought him to the largest tent. Inside, cedar smoke, firelight, the smell of something sharp and medicinal. And sitting across from the entrance on a folded blanket was the oldest man Cole had seen in some time. Not fragile, old the way granite is old, like something that has simply outlasted everything that tried to wear it down. The kind of certainty that doesn't announce itself, Chief Gray Elk. He didn't know the name yet. He'd learn it in the next 10 minutes. What he knew immediately was that this was a man who had never spent a moment unsure of where he stood. Sosie went to the chief. The old man held her with his eyes closed, and something moved across his weathered face that Cole recognized even though it had never been directed at him. Relief. The animal kind. The kind that lives in the chest. Gray Elk opened his eyes and looked at Cole, examined him for 30 seconds without expression. Cole let it happen. He had dust in his hair and a hole in his boot and had just carried a child 4 miles through September, and he was going to look like whatever he looked like. Gray Elk spoke. The translator beside him, younger, watchful, positioned as an advisor, converted it to English. The chief says you found his granddaughter. Yes, sir, alone. In the canyon, yes, she was in a bad way. She was, Cole didn't embellish. She's all right now. Gray Elk spoke again. The chief asks what you want. Cole blinked. I'm sorry. For what you did. There is a debt. The chief will pay it, and there it was. The moment when Cole, not a complicated man, not a man who wanted complicated things, could have made the simple choice: land, horses, money. The boots alone justified something. He opened his mouth. Nothing, he said. The translator stared at him. Cole shrugged. She needed help. I helped her. That's the end of it. A long quiet. Gray Elk and the translator exchanged a look Cole couldn't read. Then the old man said something quietly, and the translator turned back with an expression that had shifted into something more careful. The chief says that is a good answer, but not one he can accept. I don't follow. There is a debt. It must be paid. This is not about what you want. A pause, and the chief says he has something to offer, but he must be honest with you first. The cedar smell thickened. Outside, someone played something stringed, low and wandering. He has a daughter, the translator said. 20 summers. Strong, healthy, sharp. A pause that felt deliberate. And no warrior in this camp has been willing to marry her. The words sat in the space between them. Cole's brain moved fast. She's sick. No, he said, healthy. She's violent. Possible. There's something wrong you can't see, which could mean anything. Could mean everything. Why would every man? The chief says you may refuse. If you refuse, there is no dishonor for you. But another consultation. You will not be permitted on Apache land after tonight. Any Apache land. In any direction, Cole thought about the map in his head, his ranch, the 4 directions home. The only viable route that didn't add 3 weeks through genuinely dangerous country ran directly through land controlled by this camp. He was not a man who appreciated being cornered, but he also, and this was the thing, he looked at Gray Elk's face. The old man was watching him without pressure. Just watching. And Cole saw it again, the thing he'd seen when the chief held his granddaughter. Not manipulation, not calculation, desperation. Old and worn smooth, the way things get when you've carried them too long. This man had a daughter no one wanted, and it was hollowing him out. Can I meet her first? Cole said. The translator spoke. Gray Elk responded. The chief says no. He's asking me to agree before. Yes, and if I say no, you leave tonight. You do not come back. Cole sat with this. Long enough that the fire crackled twice and biscuit outside made her impatient sound. He looked at Gray Elk. Gray Elk looked back. In the old man's eyes, Cole found something he hadn't expected. Honesty. Not salesmanship. Not threat. Just a man with the last cards he had left, spread on the table waiting. She's probably a disaster. Reasonable assessment. This is probably a mistake. Also reasonable. You are 25 and alone, and the last woman you could have married you let walk away, because the timing wasn't right. And Cole, the timing is never right, it just stops being an option. His house. 2 rooms. Too quiet. All right, he said. The ceremony was at dawn. He didn't sleep. They gave him a tent near the horses. Warmer than expected because horses are warm, and he'd slept in worse. And he lay in the dark, listening to the camp settle, and trying to prepare himself for whatever morning held. She's probably angry all the time. That would explain it. Or he tried to think of other reasons an entire camp of men would avoid a healthy 20-year-old woman. Every reason he landed on was worse than the last. The Arizona stars outside the tent flap were extraordinary. Close, the way desert stars always are. His father used to say, God didn't bother putting them far away out here, because there weren't enough people to make the distance necessary. Cole didn't believe in much, but he lay there looking up and thought, whatever is about to happen, I did something for the right reasons. That didn't make it wise. But it was something. The pre-dawn ceremony was quieter and more formal than anything he'd imagined. Gray Elk conducted it himself, his voice low and rhythmic in the cold early light. A fire. A circle. The smell of something burning that wasn't wood. Two elderly women came from the direction of the camp between them. A figure, completely covered in a blanket, thick, woven, red and turquoise and the brown gold of canyon walls. Colors that belong to the landscape the way geological formations do. Not decorative, old. The kind of old that means something has survived, medium height. That was all Cole could determine. He prepared himself. He was genuinely, honestly preparing himself. He had spent the night pre-accepting whatever was under that blanket. He had talked himself into a state of radical open-mindedness that he was quite proud of. A man marrying blind into this deserved credit for. One of the elderly women reached out and pulled the blanket away. Cole's brain stopped, just stopped. Like a clock that's had its pendulum grabbed mid-swing, because there was nothing to prepare for. The woman standing in the early light of the Dragoon foothills was the most purely, simply beautiful person he had ever seen in his life. Not the announced kind of beauty, not the kind that works at itself, the quiet kind. The kind that takes you completely off guard because it isn't trying. A dress of soft tanned hide, warm ochre, the color of desert at noon, with long fringe along the hem and sleeves that caught the morning breeze. The leather worked soft and old, worn by someone who lived in it rather than preserved it. Across the chest and collar, small beads of turquoise, that specific blue-green between sky and water, stitched in careful patterns, a braided leather belt, moccasins to mid-calf, silver at her neck, a hammered disc on a cord, etched with something too fine to read at distance. Smaller rings on 2 fingers, cuffs at her wrists, dull with the particular shine of metal touched daily, not kept in boxes. Her hair was black. Black the way Arizona nights are black. Total, absolute, divided into 2 long braids over her shoulders, reaching her waist, tied with cord that matched the turquoise beads. Not decorative braids, practical ones. The kind worn by someone whose hair is always in the way. Her face. High cheekbones, a jaw with structure, lips held with the pressure of someone who had chosen silence and practiced it long enough that it had become a posture. Skin the warm brown of desert earth after rain, and her eyes dark amber, honey and clay, looking at him, not warm, not cold, assessing. Moving over him with the careful precision of someone reading terrain. Taking inventory, noting exits, not afraid, not pleased, not curious. The way you look at something you've been warned about. Cole realized he'd been standing with his mouth slightly open for probably 5 seconds. He closed it. He had prepared for many things. He had not prepared for her. Why? The question formed and collided with itself. Why would anyone? It didn't make sense. A woman who looked like this, and not one man, she must be. Something had to be wrong, because otherwise nothing he understood about anything. She blinked once, turned slightly away, the assessment complete. Moved on. Gray Elk spoke. The ceremony continued. Cole participated in his own wedding, in a state of cognitive confusion, so complete it was almost peaceful. The leather cord tied around their wrists, his left, her right. She did not flinch at contact, did not look at him, held her arm exactly as required and no more, like a soldier observing protocol. Her wrist under the cord was small. He could feel her pulse. Even, steady, absolutely calm. She's not nervous. He was nervous enough for both of them. This seemed deeply unfair. Gray Elk cut the cord, handed it to Cole, then, in English, deliberate, looking only at Cole, said, "Take care of her. She is worth more than you know." Cole held the cord, and then something made him turn, and he found River Wolf watching. 27 years old, River Wolf. Built the way working men get built. A face that had been open once, before something made it careful. Standing at the edge of the gathered group with the posture of someone who has positioned himself to observe rather than participate. Cole had expected anger, suspicion, The look a brother gives a stranger taking his sister. What he saw instead, what he saw clearly enough that he would remember it for months, was relief. The deep, exhausted relief of someone who has been carrying a worry for a long time and has just provisionally set it down. It should have been reassuring. Except Cole looked at Kaya, then at River Wolf, then at the way the camp was watching. Carefully, at a distance, in the way communities watch things they have complicated feelings about. And he understood with a cold clarity. They didn't find someone for her. They found someone to take her off their hands, whatever Kaya was, whatever had made every man walk away. The camp knew exactly what it was. And they were grateful, grateful to the point of visible relief, that she was leaving with the white rancher who didn't know any better. What did I just agree to? The ceremony ended. Kaya walked, didn't wait, didn't look back, directly to the horse prepared for her. Mounted in one fluid motion that spoke of 1,000 repetitions, settled into the saddle, looked at the eastern horizon, not at Cole. He stood holding the cord and his conclusions, and 2 questions he didn't have answers to. Who is she? And what am I doing? And thought, this is going to be a thing. The first hour of riding was so quiet, Cole started cataloging sounds just to have something to do, whined. Biscuit's hooves on packed dirt. The creak of Kaya's saddle, better quality than his, he noticed, better maintained, which told him something he hadn't sorted out yet. A hawk somewhere above, not interested in either of them. Kaya, he said. She didn't look at him. I know this isn't what you wanted. It wasn't what I expected either. A pause. Maybe we could just talk. Get some sense of nothing. Not the uncomfortable silence of someone holding back. The silence of someone for whom his words were weather, present. Irrelevant. All right. Is there anything you want to know about where we're going? The hawk called. A lizard crossed the trail. The afternoon burned. Can you at least let me know you can hear me? She turned her head and looked at him. Just looked. Level. Patient. Like a person waiting for a question worth answering. Cole opened his mouth. Closed it, because he realized, suddenly, with a clarity that embarrassed him, that everything he'd said hadn't been a question worth answering. It had been noise. The particular noise lonely people make to fill space where connection should be. She'd known that. She'd been waiting for him to know it too. He shut up. They rode. He started paying attention to the terrain instead, because there wasn't much else to do, and the embarrassment needed somewhere to go. And that's how he noticed. The trail split 2 miles out of camp. Left, main road, clear and well used. Right, narrow, rougher, less traveled. He was already angling Biscuit left. Kaya stopped. Her horse simply stopped. Planted. Cole pulled up. What? She was already off the horse. Down on one knee in the dirt beside the trail. Her fingers moving across the ground with the specific focus of someone reading something that matters. Not scanning, reading. Word by word. He watched. She covered 4 feet of trail. 30 seconds, maybe 40. Then stood without looking at him and pointed. Right branch. What did you see? He asked. She mounted, took the right branch. Started moving. That's all. That's everything I get, he followed. Because what was the alternative? Stay on the main trail alone, which his brain tried to make appealing. Except that Kaya had clearly read something, and the choice was trust her, without explanation, or ignore her, and see what happened. 2 hours later, from the direction of the main road, carried on the evening air with the particular clarity that distance lends, gunshots, multiple, spread out, the specific pattern of something going organized and wrong. Kaya didn't stop, didn't change pace, didn't look at him. Cole reined in Biscuit and sat for a full 10 seconds, listening to the sounds from the road he hadn't taken. The shorter road. The one Kaya had looked at for 40 seconds and turned away from. He looked at her back, the straight line of her spine, the 2 braids over her shoulders, the fringe of the ochre dress against the leather of the saddle. She had known. From whatever she'd read in the dirt, she had known. She had not said there are riders ahead, or I see signs of ambush. She had gotten up and pointed and expected him to follow. And that silence, her silence, his compliance, had just saved his life. Who is this woman? He rode to catch up. When he pulled level, she glanced at him sideways. The brief check of someone confirming a fact they already knew. How far away could you read those tracks? He asked. She looked forward, didn't answer. Right. Cole looked at the trail ahead at the foothills going purple in the dusk. Right, he was going to have to get used to this. The ranch appeared on the second afternoon. He'd been describing it intermittently through the ride. Not because she was listening, or not visibly, but because the silence had developed a texture by then that he found easier to fill than sit in. Cattle, the south pasture, the fence along the creek that needed work. The barn that was bigger than the house, which said something about his priorities or his father's. He wasn't sure which anymore. She didn't respond. She rode beside him and looked at everything they passed with the same careful cataloging attention she'd given the trail dirt. Taking inventory. He was starting to understand that was just how she existed in the world. The ranch. Wooden house, 2 rooms, a covered porch he'd built badly and redone twice. A stable with 6 stalls, 4 occupied. A barn, the corral. With the fence he kept meaning to fix. Red dirt everywhere, and the specific Arizona scrub that survived by needing nothing a drought could take. Kaya looked at all of it. He waited for disappointment. Surprise. The expression women made when they saw where they'd ended up. His neighbor Braddock's wife had made it arriving from Ohio. His mother had, apparently, made it and then kept going. Kaya's face did nothing. She looked at the house, the stable, the corral fence, the barn, the house again. Then she dismounted, handed him her reins without looking at him, and walked into the stable. Well. Cole stood holding 2 horses. Make yourself at home. He followed. She was already moving through the stalls, methodical, running her hand along the walls, checking joins, looking at where posts met beams overhead. She pressed the hay, smelled it, checked how it was stored. She looked at each horse with the specific attention of someone assessing condition. Then she stopped, looked up, at the ceiling. At the 3 crossbeams Cole had replaced himself 2 summers ago, when the originals went soft. She looked at them for a long time. Turned to Cole, shook her head. Those beams are fine, he said. Automatic. The way you defend something you built with your own hands. I replaced them myself. 2 years ago. Good pine. There, she shrugged, one shoulder. The shrug of someone who has said what they have to say and will say it exactly once. I warned you. Cole looked up at the beams. They looked fine. They had looked fine for 2 years. He would continue to believe they were fine. He would remember this moment. He would remember exactly how certain he'd been, inside the house. Main room, table, 2 chairs, the sofa where he slept, the fireplace he used 3 months of the year. He started to explain the sleeping arrangements. Sofa. Obviously, he'd already decided. The situation was what it was. But she was already moving, already picking up her bag, already walking into the bedroom, the door closed, not slammed. No drama. The soft, absolute click of a latch engaging. Cole stood in his own main room looking at the closed door of his own bedroom and thought about how, up until 4 days ago, he had lived here alone, and the silence had been the ordinary kind. And now it was a different kind, and he wasn't sure it was better exactly, just different. Occupied. She doesn't want to be here. Obvious. She never wanted any of this. Also, obvious. You have no idea what you've agreed to. Getting more obvious, by the minute. He made a bed on the sofa that had the indent of his specific left hip from enough nights, and lay in the dark listening to the new quiet of a house, with 2 people in it who weren't speaking then. Very faint, almost imagined, a sound from the direction of the ceiling. He looked up. Darkness. The beams visible in the ambient light from the window. The perfectly fine beams. The structurally sound beams. Nothing there. He listened for 10 more seconds. Heard nothing? You're imagining things. He closed his eyes. It's been 4 days and you married a stranger and you should sleep. He slept. And in the darkness above him, Absolutely still, absolutely silent. A shape that had not been there before the fire went out, settled against the shadow of the largest beam, and waited. Morning came the way Arizona mornings did. Sudden, golden, committed. Cole woke to the smell of coffee. Which was wrong, he was the only one who made coffee in this house. Had been for 5 years. The coffee lived in a specific tin above the stove. You had to know where to find it, and you had to know how he'd rigged the percolator, because it had a tendency, and if you didn't know the tendency, you got grounds and everything. He got up, walked to the kitchen. Kaya was at the stove, not looking at him, moving a spoon with the specific motion of someone listening to what's happening in a pot rather than watching it. Her braids over her shoulders, slightly looser than yesterday. The fringe of the ochre dress catching the morning light. On the table, 2 cups, a plate, something he didn't recognize, that smelled better than anything he'd made himself in recent memory. The coffee was exactly right. The percolator hadn't given her any trouble. He stood holding the cup, and she stood at the stove, not looking at him, and he thought about saying thank you and then thought about how she'd respond. The shrug, probably, or nothing. And what he said instead was nothing. He just drank the coffee, and for the first time since Tuesday, the quiet felt almost okay. Day 5. The south fence section he'd been putting off for 2 weeks was repaired. 3 rails, clean posts, the kind of work that took an afternoon. She'd done it before breakfast. Cole stood at the fence with his coffee and felt something he didn't have a word for. Not gratitude, exactly. Something more unsettling. The specific feeling of realizing someone has seen your incompleteness and addressed it without being asked. He wasn't sure if that was generous or an accusation. Day 6, the mare. Rosie was the difficult one. Bay quarter horse with opinions about everything, and the willingness to share them physically. She'd been limping for a week, left front. Cole had checked the hoof 4 times. Found nothing. She wouldn't let him close enough to look properly, because Rosie's feelings about being handled were complicated and resentful. He was planning to get the farrier from Dustfall. Next week, he came to the stable that morning, and Rosie was standing on all 4 feet, weight even, not shifting, not favoring, standing the way a horse stands when it doesn't hurt anymore. Kaya was at the far end of the stable, rinsing her hands, already putting away small tools he didn't recognize. A pouch that smelled green and medicinal. Cole walked to Rosie's stall. The mare, who had bitten the farrier and expressed her opinion of the local veterinarian through targeted rear kicks, stood calmly. Let Cole approach. Let him lift the hoof, a small puncture, freshly cleaned. A wound so small he'd missed it 4 times. Dressed now with something that smelled like pine and chamomile and something else. He looked at Kaya's back, at the braids over her shoulders. How did you? Rosie doesn't let anyone. She picked up her bag, walked out, left him with his miracle horse and his unfinished sentence. Right. Cole scratched behind Rosie's ear. I don't know either, he told her. Rosie did not find this helpful. Day 8, Voss Braddock. He had a gelding with a recognizable canter, heavy like a man who wanted you to hear him coming, which was accurate to his personality. Braddock was 40, broad, a face that had been decent-looking once before too much sun and too many opinions worked on it. Cole was on the barn roof. Did not come down. Heard you got married, Braddock said. The pause that wanted something put in it. Apache, they're saying. That's right. You want to be careful, Cole. Whole town's talking. People have, he found the wrong word. Concerns. Cole set down his hammer. Concerns, he said. About an Apache living this close too. She's my wife. Said the way you say something that ends a conversation. She lives in my house, on my land. The town can bring its concerns directly to me. He picked the hammer back up. We done? Braddock left. Heavy canter all the way down the road. Cole kept working. Nailed 3 more boards. Didn't think about it, except. When he came down an hour later and walked around the corner of the house, Kaya was there. Standing at the garden, working. but facing the wrong direction for the work she was doing, facing the direction Braddock had ridden from. She'd heard Cole looked at her. Her hands moved on the plants. Her face showed nothing at all, which was its own kind of information. "He's a fool," Cole said, simply, "and the town can mind its business." She kept working, but her shoulders, just slightly, dropped half an inch. Like something she'd been carrying got marginally lighter. He didn't point it out. He went back to the barn. That night was different, not dramatically, not in any way you could point to. Cole was at the table after dinner. Kaya's cooking again. Something with rabbit and garden plants that was better than anything he'd made himself in 5 years, which he found mildly humiliating, and he heard her in the kitchen. The sounds of putting things away, then quiet, and then she came back in, which she didn't usually do. Usually, dinner, cleanup, bedroom, done. She came back in and sat down across from him. Cole didn't move, didn't speak, didn't want to do anything that would stop this. She looked at the table, at her hands. At some middle distance, then she looked up, met his eyes, said, "Thank you." 2 words, quiet as something that cost something. Then she stood, walked to the bedroom. The latch clicked. Cole sat there. 2 words, for what he'd said to Braddock. For something that was, in his assessment, the bare minimum a decent person would do. He hadn't thought about it. He just said the thing that was true. And to her, apparently, that was worth thank you. He sat with that for a long time. Day 11. Sheriff Cade, Pruitt Cole had been expecting this. Dustfall ran on talk, and talk had been running hot since the week before, and Pruitt was a man who moved at the speed of institutional discomfort. Not fast, but inevitable. He came mid-morning. Alone, which was a good sign. Official expression, which was not. Pruitt was 52, weathered in the way of men who'd spent decades managing situations they hadn't created. He'd been sheriff since before Cole arrived, and would likely be sheriff until the county got absorbed by something bigger and bureaucratic. Not corrupt, not cruel. Just the weight of things pressing down through him. Morning, Cole, sheriff. Cole leaned against the porch post. Didn't invite him in. Pruitt took his hat off, turned it in his hands. "You know why I'm here, I can guess. Pima County has a record-keeping requirement for non-settler residents. There's a registration process through the county seat, and until that's completed—" "My wife," Cole said. "You're talking about my wife. I'm talking about the process that applies to Apache people living on private land. They have a legal right to." Pruitt put his hat on, took it off again. "Cole, I'm not looking for trouble. I'm telling you how things stand so you can manage accordingly." "What does managing accordingly look like?" A pause. A careful look at the barn, the garden, the stable, taking in what the ranch had become in 11 days. "Paperwork," Pruitt said. "Submitted to the county seat in Tucson. If you've got a marriage certificate, Apache ceremony. Witnessed by the chief. That's going to be a harder argument, I imagine it is." They looked at each other. Pruitt with his hat in his hands. Cole on his porch, not moving. "I've got 72 hours, Pruitt said, before I have to follow up with something more official." "I understand that, Cole." Something shifted in his voice. Something older and more tired. "I've got nothing against her personally. What I understand," Cole said, "is that you're giving me 3 days. So I'll use them." Pruitt nodded, mounted, rode toward Dustfall. Cole stood on the porch until he was gone, then turned around. Kaya was in the doorway. The exact position that gave her full view and full sound of everything. She looked at him. He looked at her. She'd heard all of it. The words, the tone, the thing Pruitt hadn't said, which was the most important part. "I'll ride to Tucson tomorrow," Cole said. "I'll talk to whoever needs talking to." She said nothing. "You're not leaving," he said. "That's not happening." Something moved in her face. Quick, gone. Not the skepticism he'd expected. Not wariness. Something more like a woman who had been told before that she would be protected, who hadn't believed it, who wasn't sure what to do with being told again. She stepped back inside. Cole followed, and got to work on figuring out Tucson. 2 days later, Widow Etta Crane. Cole hadn't left yet. He was waiting on a letter he'd sent ahead to a county recorder in Tucson. And Etta came up the road in Tucson, and Eddie up the road late afternoon driving her wagon with the brokelet footwheel she'd been meaning to fix since April. Everyone knew Etta. 64, sharp as a filed blade, slow to trust and quick to judge, and right about it roughly 50% of the time, which made her invaluable as an ally and catastrophic as an opponent. She had a boy with her, grandson, 6 years old, small for his age, with a gray look to his face and the particular limpness of a child using all available energy just to stay upright. Cole Hargrove. She pulled the wagon up without pleasantries. I heard you married an Apache woman who knows plants. That's largely accurate. Dr. Hennessy's given Eli 3 things, and none of them have touched this fever. 8 days. She looked at the boy with the specific expression grandmothers develop when they've converted fear entirely into determination. I'd rather be made a fool than watch this child get worse. Cole looked at Eli. Looked at the house, he started. Kaya was already there. She'd come from the garden, dirt on her hands, braids dust caught from the afternoon wind, and she was looking at the boy without looking at anyone else. Her gaze moved over him the way her hands had moved over Rosie's hoof. Slow, systematic, reading. Etta looked at Kaya, at the ochre dress, the turquoise beads, the braids, the garden dirt on her hands. And then, which Cole would think about later, which impressed him almost as much as what followed. Etta Crane said nothing skeptical at all. Just, can you help him? Kaya looked at her. A beat. Then held out her hands. An indication, not a request. Etta helped Eli down from the wagon. Kaya crouched to the boy's level. Touched his forehead with the back of her hand, not the palm. Deliberate, his neck. Looked in his eyes, which he allowed with the docile cooperation of a child, too tired to resist. His hands, his color. She stood, went back to the garden. Etta watched her go. Looked at Cole. She'll come back, Cole said. She came back. 3 things from the garden and a folded cloth, 2 dried things from the kitchen pouch, something wrapped with the particular care of someone who has done this before and knows exactly what can go wrong if you don't. She handed them to Etta with a look that communicated precisely. Prepare it this way, not that way, this way. How she conveyed this without words, Cole couldn't fully account for. But Etta Crane received the information and received it correctly, because she nodded the way a person nods when following precise instructions. Kaya went back to the garden. Etta watched her. Then Cole. Then the garden again. Said Etta Crane, from Etta. That was extensive. She came back 48 hours later. The boy was running ahead of the wagon. Running. The gray gone from his face. Opinions at volume about a lizard he'd seen on the road. Etta walked to where Kaya was working and stood there until Kaya looked up. Thank you, Etta said. Kaya met her eyes. That level amber gaze. I don't know your name. Etta said, I should know your name. A pause. Kaya, she said. Kaya. Etta repeated it correctly on the first try, which Cole suspected was not an accident. I'm Etta Crane. 3 miles north. A pause. And anyone in this county who speaks an ill word about you in my presence is going to have a conversation they weren't planning on having. Said the way you state a fact about weather. Not a promise. A thing that was simply going to happen. Something happened at the corner of Kaya's mouth. Not quite a smile. The precise muscular precursor to one. Cole was paying attention. He was paying an embarrassing amount of attention. Etta got back on her wagon. Drove away. The boy hung off the back, waving. Kaya watched them go. Went back to work. Week 5. The night it happened started like every other night. Dinner. The table. The ranch settling. Wood cooling, animals shifting. Cole banked the fire. Considered whether he was tired enough to sleep yet, which he usually was by 8, which he'd stopped being embarrassed about. After he noticed Kaya was also apparently asleep by 8. Tonight he fell asleep faster than usual, which meant he was deeper under when the sound came, a creak. Not the ordinary kind. Houses make sounds, temperature and old wood. This was different, intentional. the specific creak of something applying weight in a chosen location. Cole was sitting up before he knew why. Hand to the Colt on the table beside the sofa. Grip, weight, good. He listened. The house breathed. A horse shifted in the stable. An owl outside. Wind then. The scrape of the front door latch. Slow, deliberate. The technique of someone who'd done this before. Cole was on his feet. One look at the bedroom door. Closed. Dark. The strip of light that was there when Kaya had her lamp on, which it wasn't. She's asleep. 2 steps to her door. 1 quiet knock. Kaya. Someone's outside. No answer. He opened the door. Dark. The bed empty. Not slept in and left, made. Untouched. Cole stood in the doorway of his empty bedroom and felt the specific lurch of a man whose understanding of a situation has just been revised downward. Where is she? Where? A sound from the front of the house, the door now open. Cole pressed to the hall wall. Cole up. 3 men came in, not quietly, not anymore. The way men come in when they've decided surprise matters less than size. First through the door, tall, broad. A face that something had disagreed with, repeatedly in one. Long scar along the right cheekbone. Revolver on one hip, knife on the other. The specific posture of a man who'd been in enough rooms like this to feel comfortable. Rail Decker. Cole knew the name. Dustfall's grapevine had its uses. The other 2 were younger. Less settled in their violence. Still learning to wear it. Decker looked around the room, found Cole, smiled, with the working half of his mouth. Evening, conversational, a social call. We don't want trouble. Cole said nothing. Colt visible. Wall, not the center of the room, the way his father had taught him. Trees don't stand in the open, son. Just looking for a few things, Decker said. Money, if you've got it. Horses. And, he tilted his head. Heard there's a woman here. Apache. Knows medicine, plants. That kind of knowledge sells. The floor under Cole's feet felt very solid. Specifically solid. The way things feel when you want to make sure of them. She's not here, Cole said. That's so. Decker was already looking at the hall. Went back to her people. Decker looked at him slowly. Thing about that, friend, is there's a woman's clothes in this house. Something was cooked tonight that wasn't yours. And he took another step. You look a lot like a man guarding something that isn't there. Cole moved. Sideways, cutting off the hall. Decker stopped. Tilted his head the other way. That's interesting. 2 of us can make a deal, Cole said. You take what's here and leave. That's the deal. The deal I'm thinking of. Something fell, except it didn't fall. It descended. From the ceiling. From the beams Cole had told himself were fine. That he'd replaced himself 2 years ago and were structurally sound. A shape dropped into the room, between Cole and Decker, with the specific precision of something that had chosen its landing point carefully. No noise on impact, none. Like cloth settling, like a branch finding a lower position. Kaya standing in the center of Cole's main room. She had not been asleep. She had not been in the bedroom at all. She had been on the ceiling, on the beams, the ones she'd looked at on day 1, and shaken her head at, and said nothing because she'd already said it once, and wasn't going to say it again. She'd been up there long enough to know exactly what was happening and pick exactly when to move. The ochre dress. Always the ochre dress. Fringe and turquoise and old leather that fit her like it had been made for her by time. Her braids had loosened, one partly undone from whatever she'd been doing in the dark up there. A length of rope in her right hand, coiled with the ease of something used since childhood. The knife already on her belt. She looked at Decker, not at Cole, not at the others. At Decker, entirely. With the quality of attention that separates the primary problem from everything else. Decker blinked, then laughed. The laugh of a man who has decided what he's seeing is less dangerous than it is. A woman, he said. That's the rope moved. Cole had roped cattle his whole working life. Good at it, better than most. What Kaya did with that rope in the next 2 seconds bore the same relationship to what Cole did as surgery bears to a kitchen knife. It flew. It opened. It went around Decker's ankles with the mathematical certainty of something that had always been going to land exactly there. She pulled. 230 pounds of rail decker went horizontal. The back of his skull met the wooden floor with a sound that ended all the sounds he'd been making. The second man yelled, drew something, lunge. Kaya stepped sideways. Not a step, the motion of water moving around a rock. She was there, and then she wasn't. And the man's momentum was carrying him past where she'd been, and she added something small to that momentum with one arm, and he hit the table. The table hit the floor. 2 chairs didn't survive. The man lay in the wreckage, making a sound that suggested he was present but not participating. The third, young, 20 maybe. The youngest and the most frightened. Cole had noted this from the start as the most important factor in the room. He looked at Decker on the floor, at his companion in the furniture, at Kaya standing in the center of the room, breathing exactly as she had before any of this started, rope still in hand. He dropped his knife. It hit the floor. He looked at Kaya. She pointed at the door. He went through it so fast, Cole heard him trip on the porch step. Then running, getting smaller, then nothing. True silence. Decker was moving, slowly, getting his bearings back from wherever the floor had sent them, blood on his nose. The dazed expression of a man whose confidence has recently been restructured. He looked up at Kaya. Something moved across his face. Fear dressed in an older word for it. Which, he said. Almost an observation. What are you? Kaya took one step toward him, just one. Unhurried. Inevitable. Decker made a sound that did not belong to the man who'd walked in 20 minutes ago. He grabbed at the floor, got his feet under him, grabbed his companion by the collar, and got them both through the door in a movement that was more falling than walking. Then the sound of horses leaving in a hurry. Then nothing. Cole was against the wall. Had been the entire time. Had not fired the Colt onces, which he was taking a moment to fully come to terms with. His wife had handled 3 armed men completely, while he held a gun he never used. He looked at the ceiling, at the beams, the fine beams, the structurally sound beams. She hadn't been skeptical about them on day 1. She'd been doing reconnaissance. She'd looked at those beams and thought, those will hold me, filed it away. Because she was a person who lived in a world where knowing which beams would hold your weight was just practical. Kaya turned around, her face, no triumph, no anger, no adrenaline. The focused clarity of someone who has done what was necessary and is now checking for what comes next. Her eyes moved over Cole. Hurt? She said. Cole opened his mouth. Closed it? No, he said. No, no. She checked the front door, both windows, the hall, the bedroom. Came back to the main room. Looked at the damaged blood on the floor, the table in pieces, 2 chairs that were now memory. Looked at Cole. You're going to ask questions, she said. Not accusatory, not resigned. Accurate. Yeah, Cole said. I think I am. Not tonight. He looked at the floor, at the blood, at what had been his dining set. Fair enough. She went to the bedroom. Cole stood in the wreckage of his room and looked at the ceiling. And thought about beams for a long time. Morning? The east window light landing on the same spot of floor it always found. Cole had made the good coffee, because the previous night had involved his furniture being destroyed, and he felt that justified it. He was at the table, still functional if you didn't stress the left joint. When Kaya came out, she sat down across from him, which she'd started doing sometimes, and which he still didn't know how to respond to without somehow making her stop. He poured her a cup and said nothing. She drank. He waited outside. Biscuit at the corral fence making her feelings about breakfast known, pointed and rhythmic. Early birds. The dry wind off the flat. You want to know, Kaya said. If you want to tell me. She looked at the coffee cup, turned it slightly in her hands. He'd started noticing that. The way she touched things she was thinking through. As if contact was part of the process. When she spoke carefully. Not because she was translating. Her English was precise, had always been, in the few sentences he'd heard from her, but because the words cost something, and she wasn't spending carelessly. My mama died, she said. I was 7. He didn't move. The way you don't move when something wild is close enough to touch. My father didn't know what to do with a daughter after that. A pause. My brother River Wolf. He took me with him. Hunting. Fighting. She looked at the cup. He taught me everything he knew. He taught you well, Cole said. He taught me too well. The words came out flat. The kind of truth that had been held long enough that the anger drained out, leaving only shape. When I was 15, warriors came for marriage. She picked up the cup, set it down without drinking. I could beat them in horse races. Track better. Shoot farther. A beat. The first one left and said, my hands were too rough. The second said I didn't smile enough. She stopped. Started over. They were not embarrassed by what I could do. They were afraid of it. Afraid their children would look at their mother more than their father. Afraid of what other men would say. Cole's hands were still on the table. So you stopped, he said. Quiet. Because he'd been building this understanding for 5 weeks, and this was the last piece of it settling. I stopped competing. Stopped showing anything. She looked at him. Those amber eyes, level and honest and still carrying something careful in them. I became silent. I thought, if I made myself smaller, they'd stop being afraid. Yes, but they didn't. They already knew. She looked back at the cup. You can stop performing. You cannot make people forget what they have seen. The kitchen was quiet. Cole thought about his father. About a ranch meant for 2 people that had only ever had one. About the specific shape of a life that has learned to accommodate absence so thoroughly it stops noticing. Your father, Cole said, offering you to me. Without telling me any of this. Something shifted in her face. He thought. She paused. He thought a man who didn't know my reputation would not carry the same fear. A man from outside. She looked at him directly. He wasn't wrong. Cole looked at her. No, he said. He wasn't wrong. She didn't look away. Which was different. She'd stopped looking away so quickly over recent weeks. Still didn't hold his gaze the way people do when they're trying to say something, but held it now the way someone does when checking whether it's safe to say the next thing. The beams, Cole said. The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite the thing he'd been watching for. But close, day 1, yes. You weren't worried about them falling. No, you were deciding if they'd hold you. She looked at him. Yes, Cole thought about this. About a woman who walked into a strange man's house in a life she hadn't chosen, and the first thing she did was identify where she could go if things went wrong. The escape route, the high ground. The place no one would look because no one thought the way she thought. Not paranoia. Just the particular intelligence of someone who learned very early that knowing your exits is how you survive. He thought about what that said about the life she'd been living. Kaya, he said. She waited. He wasn't a man of speeches. He'd tried speeches in the first week. She'd received them like weather, present, irrelevant. So he said the small, true thing. I don't want a wife who stays in her room. I don't need someone who smiles when she doesn't mean it or makes herself smaller, so I can feel bigger. He looked at the table, at the grain of the wood, at the coffee rings. In 5 weeks you fixed things I didn't ask you to fix. Grew things on ground I'd written off. Healed my mare in 30 seconds when I couldn't get close for a week. He looked at her. And last night you handled 3 armed men while I stood. They're trying to remember where my feet were. She was watching him carefully. The men in your camp were afraid of that, Cole said. I'm not. A beat? That's not bravery, he said. That's just honesty. I'm not afraid of you. I'm relieved. I'm glad you're here. And I'd like us to stop being strangers, if that's something you're willing to try. He put his hand on the table, palm up, not grabbing, just there. Available, partners, he said. Not chief's daughter and rancher, just partners. Kaya looked at his hand. Biscuit made her breakfast noise outside. The light moved on the floor. She put her hand over his rough palm. Warm. The hand of someone who works hard and has for a long time and makes no apology for it. Partners, she said. And then, because she was exactly who she was, she picked up her coffee and drank. Cole sat there with the warm imprint of her hand on his, and the morning coming through the window, gold and level, and thought, well, all right then. He rode to Tucson 3 days later, left at dawn, told Kaya where he was going, and approximately how long it would take, which she received with the nod that meant, I understand, proceed. He left her with the rifle and both good horses, and did not worry about her safety because he had enough information by now to understand that worry in her direction was, in this specific case, redundant. The county recorder's office was a small building staffed by a man named Arguello, who seemed genuinely pleased to have something interesting to process. Cole laid out his documentation, the cord from the ceremony, a written account, and a letter from Gray Elk that River Wolf had sent ahead by messenger 2 weeks earlier. Cole had understood, receiving it, that it was not a coincidence. River Wolf had known Cole would need it. River Wolf had planned accordingly. It's irregular, Arguello said. Yes, tribal ceremony only, no county record. What would you need? Cole said, to make it regular. They talked for 2 hours. Cole left with a list of additional documentation and a provisional acknowledgement. One Kaya, wife of Cole Hargrove, was a legal resident of the Hargrove property in the Dustfall district of Pima County. Pending further paperwork, provisional. Pending but not gone. He bought new boots, both soles, no holes, and a small thing he saw in the window of the dry goods store that he didn't examine his own reasoning about and put in his saddlebag. He was back on the third evening, coming up the road in the particular blue of desert dusk. 4 people in his yard, Voss Braddock, 2 men from town he recognized, and widow Etta Crane, standing between Braddock's group and Kaya's general direction, with the posture of a woman who has decided this is her hill. Kaya was at the garden, working. Back to all of them. Cole came off his horse before it stopped. Braddock. Braddock turned with the expression of a man who's been in a difficult negotiation and is relieved by an interruption. Cole. This isn't. I can see what this is. Cole walked to where Kaya was, stood beside her, looked at Braddock's group, then at Etta Crane. Thank you, Mrs. Crane. Etta nodded once. Precisely, I'll be going. Kaya. She nodded at her too. Kaya didn't look up from the garden, but her head inclined, the small motion that meant, received. Etta left. The 2 men from town lost their conviction rapidly without her presence and followed. Braddock was last. He looked at Cole, at the garden, at the ranch, which didn't look like the ranch of a man making a mistake. You're going to do this, he said, not aggressive. Checking. It was done before you got here, Cole said. Braddock rode north. Cole stood in his yard in the blue dusk. Kaya stood up from the garden, brushed the dirt from her hands, looked at him. That checking look. Provisional, Cole said. But they're not sending you anywhere. She looked at him for a moment. The boots, she said. He looked down. New boots, no hole, about time, she said. Anne went inside. Cole stood in his yard and laughed, quietly, into the Arizona dusk. The laugh of a man who keeps being outpaced by someone he's still trying to catch up to, and has stopped being bothered about it. He reached into his saddlebag, the small thing from Tucson. A comb, silver-handled. A simple pattern worked into the metal, not Apache, not pretending to be, but careful and good, and made by someone who took things seriously. He'd seen it and thought of her braids, of the cord she retied them with every morning, of the fact that he had never once considered whether she had the ordinary, small things she needed. He set it on the table inside. No note, no ceremony. Just left it and went to see to the horses. In the morning it was gone from the table. He didn't ask. She didn't explain. Which was he was learning, its own kind of conversation. 3 months. That's how long it took Cole Hargrove to stop noticing what was different and start noticing what was simply there. Real. The way things were now. 3 months since a Tuesday in late September, when he heard a sound from a dry canyon and followed it without thinking. 3 months since a blanket fell and his brain stopped for 5 seconds. 3 months since he'd lain on his sofa, listening to the silence of 2 people not speaking, and thought, This is going to be a thing. It had been a thing. It was still a thing. Just not the kind he'd thought. The garden was the first evidence anyone in Dustfall would point to. It was visible from the road. You couldn't miss it passing the Hargrove spread. 3 months ago, scrub, rock, the particular defeated look of land that had stopped trying. Now, rose, structure, green in shades Cole hadn't known Arizona possessed. Something flowering at the border that Etta Crane had identified on her third visit, and then stood looking at for a long time with the expression of someone revising their understanding of what's possible. Word had gone out, the way it goes in small places, quietly first, in the pauses of other conversations. That woman at Hargrove's, the Apache woman. Then the story about Etta's grandson, told by Etta herself with the directness of a woman who has decided something and is not embarrassed. Then the widow on the south side of Dustfall with joint pain that had kept her off her feet 2 seasons. Then the Calloway family's sick cattle. Kaya had looked once, identified something in the water source, redirected them to the Clean Creek branch, taken nothing for it. People talked about Kaya the way they talked about weather. Factually. With a kind of relieved wonder, like a drought ending, not everyone. But enough. Cole noticed it in how Dustfall handled him when he came for supplies. Less of the careful look men gave someone they decided had made a mistake. More of the look they gave someone with information they wanted and weren't sure how to ask for. He didn't offer it. He bought his supplies and rode home. Because home was something now. That's what he hadn't predicted and couldn't have. That this ranch, which had always been a functional place where work happened. And seasons changed, and Cole existed in the practical manner of a man who'd learned not to want much. That it could become a place with texture. Weight. A reason to come back to it that had nothing to do with obligation. The table had been repaired. New chairs, he'd made them himself over 2 evenings, while Kaya sat on the porch with her own work, and she'd watched him measure the joint wrong the first time, and said nothing until he looked at her in frustration, and then she pointed to where the angle was off. One gesture, he fixed it. That chair had held solid for 11 weeks. The north beam in the stable had been reinforced. He'd done it himself, chosen not to tell her. She'd walked in, looked up, looked at him, and said nothing. He'd chosen to interpret this as approval. Mostly because he needed to believe the beam situation was resolved, and couldn't face another round of that particular shrug. Their evenings had their own grammar. Dinner, the table, sometimes talking, sometimes not. The talking, when it came, had stopped being the careful exchange strangers and become something more like thinking aloud, in the presence of someone you trusted, not to use it against you. He'd told her about his father. One night, without planning to. Just the shape of the man, the ranch, the work ethic, the particular philosophy that said a man who needed to be told he'd done well hadn't learned what doing well felt like from the inside. He said it neutrally. The way you say things that stopped hurting. Kaya had listened with the full attention of someone who believes listening is a serious act. And when he finished, she said, "He taught you to be enough." Cole sat with that. "I think he taught me not to need," he said. "Same thing," she said. From the outside. Then she picked up her cup. And the conversation moved, and he spent the next 3 days thinking about what she'd meant and deciding she was right. She'd told him things too. Not all at once. In the way of water, finding cracks in stone. Her mother's name, which he didn't repeat, understanding it was given carefully. The mountain she'd grown up near, and the way it looked at dawn when light hit the eastern face first, making it briefly look like fire. The names of stars in Apache. Not all of them, some. The ones she'd navigated by, as a girl, following River Wolf on nighttime tracking lessons. Learning to read the sky the way Cole had learned to read cattle. He learned to say some of them. Badly. She corrected him without mockery. The patience of someone who understands that language is worth learning correctly. He found himself looking forward to evenings. Which was new. which was something he'd been carefully not naming for about 6 weeks. The porch was his favorite part. In the evenings when the Arizona sky ran through its full theater, amber, burnt orange, that specific pink that lasted 4 minutes before the blue took over, they sat there, her side, right nearest the post, his left. Established without discussion, like a river finding its bed, one November evening, cool enough finally that sitting outside required a jacket, which he had and which Kaya had declined. She was looking at the sky, and he was looking at the sky, and the silence between them was the earned kind, the comfortable kind. Then she said, "Do you miss it?" Before what? She gestured. At the ranch. At everything that had arrived with her before me. She didn't say it, but it was there. Cole thought about it honestly. Not the polite answer. "No," he said. "I thought I'd miss the quiet." He paused. "But the quiet's the same. It just has something in it now." She considered this. "I miss my father," she said. "To the sky, not to him. I miss River Wolf." The mountains, a pause the length of choosing carefully. "I do not miss feeling wrong all the time." Cole turned to look at her profile. The clean line of it against the darkening sky. The braids. The turquoise beads gone dusky in the fading light. "You weren't wrong," he said. "You were just somewhere that didn't fit." She was quiet for a long moment. "Here fits," she said, 2 words. Simple. And they landed somewhere between his sternum and his spine in the specific way of things that are understated and more important than they sound. He looked back at the sky. Said nothing, because some things should just be received. Not built on, not responded to. Just received and held and kept. It was a Wednesday when Pruitt came back. Cole had been vaguely expecting it. The way you wait for weather you've been warned about. 3 months since the 72 hours. 3 months since Tucson and provisional and pending. Pruitt rode up mid-afternoon. Alone. Hat off before he reached the porch. Kaya was in the garden. She'd seen him coming. She saw everything coming. It was a fact of how she existed, and she hadn't moved. Still working. Back 3/4 to the road, Cole met Pruitt at the fence. The sheriff looked different. Less armored. The posture of a man who's come because he has to, not because he wants to cause trouble. Cole, hat in his hands. "I'm not here officially." Cole waited, Decker's in custody. Tucson. Made his statement last week. Pruitt looked at his hat. In his account, the person who incapacitated him was, quote, "a very large man. Possibly 2 men." A pause. He's sticking to that story. Cole looked at Pruitt. Pruitt looked at the garden, where Kaya was weeding. 5'4", braids over her shoulders. In no way a very large man or possibly 2 men. Cole said. "Yeah," Pruitt put his hat on. The provisional registration came through from Tucson, by the way. Official now. No outstanding questions. Something released in Cole's chest that he hadn't fully realized was still held. Appreciate that. The county recorder said, quoting, "It was the most thoroughly documented tribal marriage he'd ever processed. And whoever assembled it clearly had a legal mind." Pruitt looked at him with something that might have been amusement. "That you?" That was mostly the letter from Chief Gray Elk, translated by River Wolf, who has a very precise sense of what county officials need to hear. Pruitt looked at Kaya again. She hadn't acknowledged his presence. Pulling weeds with the focus of a woman who has decided this conversation belongs to Cole, and she has plans to see to. "She know?" "I'll tell her." Pruitt nodded, squared his hat. "For what it's worth, Hargrove. I was wrong about how this was going to go. Said the way you say things you've rehearsed privately, with the effort of someone for whom admissions of error are physically uncomfortable. That's all." He rode away. Cole stood at the fence, watching him go. Then turned around. Kaya was already standing up from the garden, looking at him. She'd been listening. She always listened. "Official," Cole said. She held his gaze. "No one's taking anything," he said. "It's done." She looked at the plant in her hands, then back at him. And what happened on her face then? He'd been watching her face for 3 months. With the close attention of a man who understood that most of what she communicated didn't come through words. was not simple relief. It was older and deeper. The release that happens when something you've been braced against for so long you forgot you were bracing simply stops. She looked back at the garden, went back to work. Cole went back to the cattle. And the evening came on gold and easy. And the ranch sat under the Arizona sky looking like a place where something had been settled. The night the torches came started like every other night, which is always how those nights start. Dinner. The table. Kaya had made something with dried venison, and 3 things from the garden that smelled like the best thing Cole had eaten since the last thing she'd made, because his threshold had been recalibrated over 3 months to a point that made his previous cooking look like a man who had given up. He'd told her this once. She'd said, "You used the wrong pot." Criticism and tutorial in 5 words, which he was beginning to understand was her preferred instructional format. After dinner, the porch. His side, her side, the wide Arizona dark coming in from the east. He was thinking about nothing, the good kind of nothing. When a day has been full enough that the mind finally gets to stop. Then Kaya said, "There," 1 word. Cole looked east, far enough that the lights were small, but multiple, moving. The warm orange of fire in the dark that meant torches, not lanterns, which meant something specific about intention. He counted 12. 15, moving in formation, together, deliberate. Coming at the pace of people who know exactly where they're going. He was on his feet before he'd decided to stand. Kaya was already standing, which meant she'd seen them before she said anything, which meant she'd taken a moment to assess, which meant she'd assessed and decided to tell him, which was itself information about what she thought this was. He went inside, got the rifle. When he came back out, she had the knife. Of course. It was always there. He'd stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing a part of someone that simply belongs. They stood at the edge of the porch and waited. And at some point during the waiting, he couldn't identify exactly when, and there was no way to reconstruct who had moved first. His hand had found hers, or hers had found his. His hand, her palm rough and warm. His larger, rougher in different places from different work. Neither of them mentioned it. The torches kept coming. 15 riders, walking pace now. The pace of arrival. Then the firelight got close enough. Apache. The specific silhouettes. The way they sat their horses, lower, easier part of the animal rather than on top of it at the front. Gray elk. Cole felt Kaya's hand tighten. Once. Brief. An involuntary word, then she let go. He let go. They stood side by side on the porch of his ranch, watching her father ride across the flat toward them in the torchlight. Is this a problem? Cole's brain doing its rapid inventory. Did they come to take her back? Did something happen at the camp? Did they decide the arrangement? He stopped, watched. Gray elk reached the fence, pulled up. The riders behind him pulled up, quiet, orderly. River Wolf was at his left, looking at Kaya. Kaya was standing straight, back aligned, chin level. The posture she had, the one that said, "I am not afraid of this. I am not afraid of anything. I am simply here as myself, and whatever comes will be met." He'd spent 3 months learning to read her. This wasn't fear, wasn't defiance, something between. The stance of someone who doesn't know what's coming and has decided to meet it as themselves regardless. Gray elk dismounted. Slowly, deliberately. A man who understood that ceremony lives in the details. He walked to the fence, stopped, looked at Kaya for a long time. Cole had sat through silences with her that felt geological. This one was different. 2 people speaking in a language built across 20 years of being father and daughter. And whatever was being said was private and complete. And Cole did not try to read it. Then Gray Elk looked at Cole, the same examination as in the tent 5 months ago. Same measuring quality, different context. Then back to Kaya. "I came," Gray Elk said. His English chosen with care, because traders speak of an Apache healer 3 miles from Dustfall. Travelers speak of a woman who grew a garden on dead earth. And, a pause. A man who stood at his door and told a sheriff that his wife was not going anywhere. No one spoke. A father cannot rest on rumors, he said. He must see, Kaya said. And what do you see? Gray Elk looked at her, at the ranch, at the garden visible even in darkness, the shapes of it, the life in it. At Cole, standing beside his daughter, at the distance between them, the distance of two people who have chosen proximity. I see my daughter, the old man said, who has stopped running. Kaya made a sound, small, not words, the kind that escapes before you've decided to let it. River Wolf swung down from his horse and walked through the gate to his sister. He stopped in front of her. He'd inherited their father's stillness and something of their mother's eyes. Kaya had told Cole once, which was why she sometimes couldn't look at him straight. He looked at her now, reading her the way siblings read each other, in the accumulated private language of shared childhood. Little sister, River Wolf, you look different. Different how? He considered it seriously, because he was a serious person. Like someone who stopped apologizing for who she is. River Wolf said. Kaya looked away. Quick. The way you look away when something gets through before you had time to decide how to receive it. Gray Elk had come through the gate. He stood before Cole now, close enough to see clearly in the torchlight. The age in his face, all the years and decisions and costs that had made him. Do you love her? Gray Elk asked. No preamble, no building to it. The directness of someone who has decided the shortest line between questions is the honest one. Cole. And this was the thing. This was what he'd remember. Did not have to think. He looked at Kaya. She was looking at him. Had been since Gray Elk started the sentence. Those amber eyes that had spent 3 months reading him the way she read tracks. Carefully, precisely, believing what they showed her. He looked back. At this woman in her ochre dress with the turquoise beads dusky in the torchlight, and her braids over her shoulders, and 3 months of shared mornings and shared silences, and shared work written in the way she stood and the way she was looking at him, right now. Yes, Cole said. Not for Gray Elk. Just the truth, said the way you say something you've known for a while, and are finally giving its right name. Yes. I love her, Kaya, her face. He'd watched her face for 3 months. He knew the small lexicon of it. The tightness around the eyes, when she'd seen something troubling. The fractional lift at the left corner of her mouth that was as close as she got to open amusement. The way she looked at plants she was proud of versus plants that were giving her trouble. What happened on her face now was not in any of that. It was new. He filed it immediately and completely. She breathed in, slow. The particular quality of breath that happens when something you weren't certain was coming arrives. Gray Elk looked at Cole for a long moment. Then, good. The word of a man who has put down something very heavy. He turned to his riders, spoke in Apache. Brief, the warriors began to dismount. We camp here tonight, Gray Elk said to Cole as simply as weather. Tomorrow we ride back with good news, and that was that. The next hours were the strangest and most ordinary of Cole's life. Apache warriors in his yard. Their horses at his corral. A fire in the flat ground east of the stable. The sounds of a camp assembling, lower voices than he was used to, the specific language moving through the air. He made coffee. More than he'd ever made at once, the large winter pot. Brought it out and offered it around. There was a moment when he handed a cup to a warrior who had 5 months ago held a spear at his face, and the man took it with a nod, and that was that. History was apparently contextual. Kaya cooked. Of course. Already moving between the camp and the kitchen, with the ease of a person navigating 2 rooms of the same house. She brought things from the garden and combined them with what was in the kitchen, and what the Apache had brought in their packs, and the result fed 17 people and smelled extraordinary. River Wolf found Cole at the corral fence around 10. The camp behind them had settled into the quiet of a fire burning low. Someone somewhere playing a drum beat, soft enough to be restful. They stood at the fence in the way of men who respect each other's silence. The mare, River Wolf said eventually. The bay, Rosie. She's better, Kaya, Cole said. River Wolf nodded. confirming something he'd already known. They were quiet again. "Take care of her," River Wolf said. Cole turned to look at him. "That's my intention. It was my father's intention, too. For me to take care of her." River Wolf's jaw moved, something working through him. "I taught her everything I knew. I was proud of her." He looked at the fire, at Kaya, visible across the yard, moving between people with the ease of someone at home. "And then I let the camp decide she was too much. I could have fought it. I didn't." Cole said nothing. River Wolf wasn't asking for absolution. "You didn't know me," River Wolf said. "You walked in and agreed to take her sight unseen, because a man who owed you a debt said please. And you were better to her in 3 months than her family was. In 3 years," the fire crackled. A horse shifted. "She gave herself what she needed," Cole said carefully. "I just didn't get in the way." River Wolf looked at him. A long reading look, the family trait, Kaya's eyes in a different face. "That is not a small thing," he said. "Not getting in the way." "No," Cole agreed. "I don't suppose it is." They stood at the fence a while longer. "If you don't keep caring for her," River Wolf said eventually, conversationally, "I'll come back, I know. And she'll probably help you," Cole finished. "Yes, I've considered that." River Wolf almost smiled, the specific almost. Kaya had the same one. "Good," he said. "You're learning." He went back to the camp. Cole stood at the fence and looked at the Arizona stars. The ones his father had said were close enough to touch. The ones Kaya had been naming for him, slowly, over recent weeks. The ones she'd learned from the brother who was standing 20 feet away, looking at the same sky from the other direction. He thought about what River Wolf had said. Not getting in the way, both small and not small simultaneously. He'd spent 25 years being told, by his father, by the land, by the general weight of the life he'd chosen, that what a man does is what matters. The work, the cattle, the fence, the practical forward motion of practical days. He hadn't considered that sometimes what a man doesn't do is the point, the not flinching, the not requiring, the not fulfilling unusual science with noise because the noise makes him more comfortable, the choosing to stand beside someone and let them be what they are. He'd thought that was nothing. He was understanding now that it wasn't nothing at all. Gray elk found him near midnight, the camp quieter, the fire lower. Most of the warriors in their blankets. Cole was on the porch, just sitting, the night around him. Gray elk came and stood near the porch steps. Not on them. The old man had a particular consideration for the territories of others. That Cole had noticed from their first meeting. "May I?" Gray elk indicated the step. "Please," he sat, heavily. The way of old men who have been many things and carry all of them in the body. They were quiet together for a while. "She was always like this," Gray elk said, "from very young. Before her mother died. Before River Wolf taught her warrior skills." He looked at his hands. "She would go still and watch something. An animal, a fire, a cloud. And when she looked away, she knew everything about it. Everything it meant. Everything it was about to do." He paused. "I did not know what to do with a daughter like that." Cole said nothing. "I thought if she married." Gray elk stopped. "The traditions of my people have purpose. I did not want to see that purpose applied to my daughter the way it was applied." He was quiet a moment. "But I also did not fight it. I told myself the right man would find what was valuable in her, that it was only a matter of time. And instead," Cole said carefully, "instead they found what frightened them." The old man's voice was even. "A man who has adjudicated this before and reached the same verdict. I watched it happen one by one and told myself there was nothing I could do." He stopped. "I was wrong." Across the yard, Kaya was visible, helping distribute blankets, talking to one of the younger warriors in Apache, moving with the ease of someone who has stopped dividing herself into the version she's allowed to be. "I gave her to you," Gray elk said, "because I was out of choices. Because you needed a route and I needed to preserve honor, and it seemed the only arrangement that could work." He paused. "It was not generous. I want you to know that I know that." "She knows it too," Cole said. "Yes, she does." Gray elk looked at her. and she forgives me for it, which is more than I deserve." He turned to Cole. "She is happy here, not a question." "I hope so," Cole said. "That's what I'm working toward." Gray Elk looked at him for a moment. "You said you love her." "Yes, has she heard you say it?" Cole thought about the kitchen, the table, the coffee, the word partners. He'd said things about respect, about partnership, about not wanting her to be smaller. All true. All meant, but love. That specific word. "Not directly," Cole said. Gray Elk nodded. Like this was the answer he'd expected. "She has never been told that she is loved well," the old man said. "Her mother loved her perfectly. Then her mother was gone. Since then," he paused, "River Wolf loves her. I love her. But we have not always shown her love without conditions attached." His voice carried the specific weight of a man being honest about himself. "Tell her." Cole looked at Kaya, moving through the camp. The way people reached for things she handed them without wariness now. Without the careful management of someone they weren't sure of. She was home. In 2 homes, tonight, simultaneously. Which was more than most people ever got. "I'll tell her," Cole said. It was past midnight when they found themselves alone. The camp quiet. Gray Elk in his bedroll near the main fire. River Wolf with the watch. Kaya came up on the porch. Her side. Right, nearest the post. He was on the left. They sat for a while, neither spoke. And the silence was the kind that had been growing for 3 months. Layered, specific, carrying weight without being heavy. "Your father seems well," Cole said. "He seems older, simple, not sad. He has been worried about me for a long time. Worry is heavy. He can put it down now. He's beginning to." The fire in the yard had gone to coals. Stars at their fullest. The whole width of the sky from horizon to horizon. Kaya's braids were slightly undone. The way they got toward the end of the day, when she'd decided the day was done enough. He watched a star move, or not move, the earth turning around it, which was the same thing from here. Kaya. She turned her head. He looked at her. At that face that had been first closed, then careful, then open. In the particular way of someone who has decided trust is worth the risk. At the eyes that had gone from reading him like a threat to something else. Something he'd been watching develop for months. And hadn't named, because naming it felt like it required her permission. "I love you," Cole said. 3 words, the simplest ones, the most complicated ones. The ones that had been accumulating in him for long enough that saying them now felt less like a declaration and more like, finally, setting down something he'd been carrying without noticing the weight. Kaya looked at him. Not with surprise. Not with the careful expression of someone who doesn't know how to receive a thing. She looked at him the way she looked at things she'd been watching long enough to understand. The steady amber gaze of a woman who has been building an assessment for 3 months and is now confirming a conclusion. She breathed in. Slow, "I know," she said, which was not what he'd expected, which was so entirely, perfectly, characteristically her that he almost laughed and stopped himself, because it felt like the wrong response to the moment. "You know," he said, "I have known, for some time." She looked back at the stars. "I was waiting to see if you knew." Cole sat with this. "And when did you?" "The chair," she said. He blinked. "The chair. You made 2 chairs. You measured the joint wrong the first time. I showed you where." She paused. "You fixed it. You didn't argue. You didn't explain. You just fixed it." A quiet beat. A man who can be corrected without losing himself. That is not a small thing. He looked at the chairs. Through the window, visible, sitting at the table. That's what did it. "Chairs, also the boots," she said, completely serious. "You bought new boots." Finally, he looked at her. She was looking at the sky. But the left corner of her mouth was doing the thing, the fractional lift. The almost smile he'd been cataloging for 3 months. "You're making fun of me," he said. "A little while I'm telling you I love you. You told me. I heard you." She turned to look at him. Fully. The full amber gaze, direct and warm in a way that had been building so gradually, he couldn't point to the moment it changed, only to the fact that it had. "I loved you first," she said. I just did not have the specific word until tonight. Cole looked at her. Your father asked me if I loved you. In front of you, I know, and you were listening. I am always listening. And when I said yes, I believed you, she said. Simple. Because you do not say things you don't mean. I have been watching you for 3 months. You are a man who doesn't say things he doesn't mean. The night around them, stars above. The fire in the yard going silver with ash. The sounds of the camp and the ranch in the desert, layered and particular, and exactly what they were. Good morning, Cole said, quietly. Partner, the corner of her mouth, the full version. Not the fractional precursor, not the almost. The actual thing, which he had been waiting 3 months to see in its complete form, and which was, as it turned out, extraordinary, not because of what it looked like, though it was remarkable, but because of what it meant, what it cost, what she was saying with it without using a single word. I am here. I chose this. I am not afraid of this. She looked back at the stars. The north beam in the stable, she said. Cole blinked. What about it? You reinforced it. Yes. On the wrong side, he turned to look at her. I beg your. The stress is coming from the east. You reinforced the west face, said the way she said everything that mattered. Factually, without drama. It's better than it was. But it will still need attention in spring. He stared at her. You should have listened to me on day 1, she said. The beam was fine on day 1. The beam was not fine on day 1. I had been working on that stable for 2 years. Yes, she looked at him. And? Cole opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the stable. In the spring, he said. In the springs, she agreed. They sat on the porch in the particular silence of 2 people who have said the important things and are now simply in the same place, which is its own kind of statement. And the stars did what stars do, and the fire went silver and lower, and somewhere Gray Elk was sleeping the sleep of a man who has put down something heavy and might, finally, rest. Dawn arrived the way Arizona dawns did, committed, golden, no hesitation. The sun deciding it was time and meaning it. Cole was already up. Good coffee made. The occasion seemed to merit it. Kaya was already in the garden. The Apache camp was stirring. The sounds of a group preparing to move, efficient and unhurried. Cole brought coffee to Gray Elk, who took it with both hands in the way of someone who receives things carefully. She seems settled, Gray Elk said, looking at the garden. At Kaya moving through it in the early light, the ochre dress bright, the turquoise catching the first sun. She is, Cole said, more than she ever was with us. She carries everything you gave her, Cole said. The garden comes from what she learned in camp, the tracking from River Wolf. The medicine, he paused. None of that came from me. I just have a place that can hold it. Gray Elk looked at him, then smiled. A real one. The lines of his face organizing themselves around it. She chose well, the old man said. Even without choosing, the riders were ready an hour later. The camp cleared, fire scattered, horses prepared. River Wolf came to stand before Cole one last time. Spring, River Wolf said. Cole looked at him. You'll come back in spring, to see how the garden grows. It'll be hard to miss. River Wolf looked at the garden, at what Kaya had made from dead ground in 3 months. At the green of it, improbable and complete against the red Arizona dirt. No, he said. It will not. Gray Elk and Kaya. Cole stepped back. Not away, just enough. The private radius of something that belonged to them. The old man held his daughter for a long time. Neither spoke. The way of people who know words are insufficient and have stopped pretending otherwise. Then Gray Elk said something in Apache. Quiet. Close to her ear. Cole didn't hear the words, but he saw Kaya's face after, and he saw the tears. Not the tears of someone falling apart. The tears of someone who has held something for a very long time, and has been finally given permission to set it down. 2 of them, 1 per cheek. She didn't wipe them. Just let them be. Gray Elk stepped back, looked at his daughter, nodded once, with the particular gravity of a man whose heart is at peace, which is different from a man whose heart is happy and much rarer. He mounted, River Wolf mounted. One by one the warriors mounted, And they moved, west toward the Dragoon foothills, in the early light that made the desert gold and the sky impossibly blue. No torches now. They didn't need them. Just horses and riders, and the sound of hooves on packed earth getting quieter by degrees. Cole stood beside Kaya, and they watched until the riders were a line, and then a suggestion, and then nothing but dust settling back to ground. The ranch was quiet, their kind of quiet, which had texture and weight, and something in it now, always something in it. Kaya was looking at the place on the horizon where they'd gone. Her braids over her shoulders, the beads catching light, the fringe of the ochre dress still. "You said you loved me," she said. "To the horizon I did, last night." Yes, she turned, looked at him. The amber eyes, level and warm, with the quality that was the opposite of what they'd been on day one. Not assessing for threat, just seeing. Seeing him specifically as she saw everything, and it's true, she said. Yes. She looked at him for a moment. "I love you," she said. First time. Those 3 words from her, in her voice. Soft and precise, and having learned to say things it had gone quiet about for years. "I have been loving you for some time. I wanted to say it when you said it last night, but it felt important to say it separately." Not as an answer, Cole looked at her. Not as an answer, he said, as its own thing. He understood that. Understood it completely, in the way of understanding someone whose logic you've spent enough time with that it has started to feel like your own. "Okay," he said. She looked at the ranch, at the garden, at the stable, where the north beam was waiting patiently for spring and Cole's belated attention. At the house with the porch he'd built badly and redone twice, about which she had apparently never commented, though he suspected she had opinions. "Good morning," she said. "Partner." Cole smiled, the full version. She turned back toward the garden. He turned toward the cattle. The sun climbed over the Dragoon foothills and landed on the Hargrove ranch and found it changed from what it had been and still in the process of becoming, which was all you could ask of any place, or any person. The north beam would be seen to in spring. The east fence needed attention before the rains. The garden was already planning something. He could tell by the way Kaya was looking at the south corner with the expression she wore. When she had a project in mind, he had a lot to learn. About the stars in Apache, about the specific grammar of her silences, about what the mountain looked like at dawn, with light on its eastern face and fire in the rock. He was looking forward to learning all of it, looking forward. Full stop. Which was new, which was worth noting. He went to feed the cattle, she went to the garden, and the Arizona morning did what Arizona mornings did, wide and golden, and entirely indifferent to what was small, and entirely present to what was real, which turned out to be everything.